Our next witness will be Marshall Babson, and next up will be Professor LaFaso. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. The colloquy with Mr. Caulfield reminded me, people often ask, what's the most important thing that you learned at the NLRB? I think I learned a lot of things at the NLRB, but one of the things that I surely learned is that the regional directors are very powerful people in the agency.
Can I stop you for one moment? Something I meant to do for our court reporter. A lot of the speakers are using the expression "our case," and just so the court reporter knows, R is the letter R that stands for representation. Sorry, please
No
go
problem.
ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Marshall Babson. I'm a partner at the law firm of Seyfarth Shaw and a former member of the NLRB. Seyfarth Shaw has one of the largest labor practices in the United States, about 400 labor and employment lawyers. I served on the National Labor Relations Board during the Reagan administration from 1985 to 1988. And it is a pleasure to be here today, and I very respectfully offer these comments and observations. I thought, what could I possibly add or suggest that might be helpful and add something to what I was sure and confident from my many friends and colleagues who are present today and tomorrow that might allow you to focus attention on some elements or aspects of this process, which I think are important. And the most significant element or aspect of this to me was process. When I thought back about some of the more significant litigation in which the agency has been involved in the last couple of years, I immediately thought of the two-member board case, New Process, Steele. I thought of the recent, relatively recent decision of U.S. Chamber of Commerce v. Brown. Both Justice Stevens' opinions and, interestingly, cases, I think, that raise issues that are related to the comments that I want to make. I think that most fair practitioners would not ab initio object to the agency seeking to improve election procedures. We all understand that trying to find a more efficient or efficacious manner or method of resolving questions concerning representation is really at the heart of this statute. And change, of course, as we know, for those of us who are students of administrative law, is not something which is foreign to the agency. In fact, there's been a lot of criticism through the years that there's been too much change. But in my view, it's because the premises for change have not always been satisfied, or at least have not been sufficiently rationalized. And so when I went through this proposal in detail, I decided that I would leave to others at the appropriate time to make specific comments, and I'm sure you'll hear many of them today and tomorrow and through the comment period about particular elements or aspects. These are all live issues. Does it make a difference whether or not 10% or 20% of the unit is in question at the time an election is conducted? These are live issues which will commend your attention. Do the voters need to know who their fellow bargaining unit members will be? Does that have some real practical significance for collective bargaining when you sit down at the bargaining table? Does it make a difference for the employer and the employees to know who are the supervisors during the course of this? But those are questions, again, which I think will be addressed and considered. And what I found, at least lacking in some material or fundamental respect in this proposal, was an accommodation of all of the legs, I think, that need to be satisfied for change. There is no question in my mind that change is contemplated by the statute, whether it's procedural change or substantive change to further the policies and procedures of the Act. But the issue, it seems to me, at hand is the board has done an outstanding job of suggesting how delay can be a problem in terms of effectuating rights. But we have this nagging question that I think was at the forefront of the two cases that I mentioned earlier that went to the court in the last few years, Brown and New Process. It's the 800-pound gorilla which is standing in the room, and that is, how do we accomplish all of the objectives of the statute? We know the Wagner Act was intended to promote collective bargaining for those of us who believe in collective bargaining. What does that mean, having had a statute that it was again amended 12 years later, and which causes someone like Justice Stevens, who I do not view as being an opponent of collective bargaining, to say that this is a statute which is suffused with the notions of debate, compromise, open discussion, that these choices with regard to collective bargaining, which is still the policy of the United States, nevertheless must be accommodated, that people need to be able to make an informed choice. I found one passing reference in the rules, maybe I missed another, but one to speech, many to speed. And I think this is something that I would like to see the board account for. You're going to hear a lot of practical input from a lot of experienced people on both sides. I think process, administrative process, requires you to tackle this two-headed nature of the statute, to understand that this proposal, in fact, these are not shibboleths that people are throwing up or bringing to you. These are real live issues. But the statute itself, I believe, an administrative process requires some accommodation of these competing interests in the statute.
Thank you very much. My colleagues have follow-up questions? Well, then let me ask you if you might take a minute or so to tell us how you think we should go about an accommodation.
Well, I think that is difficult. Obviously, you need to listen carefully and consider all the comments that are made on both sides. I don't think that it's something, I don't think it's an empty gesture when people stand up and say an employer needs time to inform the electorate. I think the agency has to account for this issue. I mean, how does one accommodate the need for speed with regard to resolving questions concerning representation and this large notion? We've heard it said many times about these competing purposes. I think I made reference, perhaps I didn't in my prepared remarks, to the Duke Law Review article that was written in 2009 by Fisk and Malamud, the NLRB, an agency in administrative and exile. There's a real fulsome discussion of the dual purposes of the statute. And I don't think, both with regard to these proposals, Chairman Liebman, and other things that have come beforehand, that it's enough just simply to say that this is a policy preference or this is a choice. I think this has nothing to do with Democrats or Republicans. It has nothing to do with liberals or conservatives. It has to do with administrative jurisprudence, it seems to me. And people who complain about policy oscillation, I think, can find some comfort in administrative principles that require not only a choice that's different, but a choice that's grounded in better practice and a choice that's grounded in the dual purposes of the statute. So I don't think there's a ready answer on this particular issue, but I think what it means is that as you're going about the process, that, and I say this very respectfully, that I think that the board would help itself enormously to explain how the choices that are made are consistent with these principles. These choices are something more than my favorite flavor of ice cream. There have been board members for the last 20 years or more who've thought that the first opportunity they had, whatever their political stripe, the first opportunity they had to make a policy choice, that they would make that choice. I think it's more than that. More than that is required. You have to demonstrate that there's a problem, and I think you've articulated that there has been a problem. Serious practitioners will acknowledge that there have been delays. on occasion. As Ed Miller said many times, one has to be careful that you don't allow the outlier to pull along everything else. But I think that one reasonably can say that there have been problems. But you have to demonstrate that the choices that are made are an improvement and they're highly consistent with the statute. But as the chairman herself has acknowledged, this is a statute with dual purposes. Someone has described it as a statute at war with itself. I think it need not be, but it definitely is a challenge that must be accommodated.
Thank you for your remarks and for being with us here
Thank you.
today.